to our podcast and vlog where we, a group of friends, get together and talk to each other and to other people about what they left at the door in order to love and grow, succeed, or survive. And today we have our friend Jenn Winn. And Jenn, you have a colorful story. I don't even know where to begin. There's so many things that we could talk about with you. So tell us, and listeners and viewers, a little bit about who you are and how you wound up here in Decatur.
Okay, so I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I've been married for 20 years. Ooh, I'm very proud of that. Okay. It's been a journey, but a good one. I have 7 kids, and why I ended up in Decatur, about a year and a half ago, my husband and I were just praying about what to do with our lives. We're in ministry, we're pastors, but we're so much more than that. We really just want to follow the Lord wherever he takes us. And he brought us to Decatur, Illinois. And so we've been here for almost 2 years now. Mm-hmm. And it's been good. It's been hard. It's been a journey. Decatur has always had a special place in my heart. And I'm sure we'll get into that at some point in time. But so I'm here. I love eclectic things. I love to be creative. If I can have like a house that has a blank slate and create something in it, that just makes me so happy.
Which their house is so cool. I love their house so much.
Thanks.
It's just like such a fun place to be.
It's like a good vibe to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I always I think about whenever you said, that you just want to go where like God tells you to. But I think I probably would have been like, did you say Decatur, Illinois? Did you say Hawaii? Is that what you said, God? Did you say paradise? Yes. So tell us about that. How the circle kind of works and following that, hearing that and saying, okay, we're doing it. We're going to go.
Okay, so do you want to dive deep?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's dive deep.
Yeah.
Okay, so about 10 years ago, my husband and I had a set of twins, and we lost one of them, and we were actually living here in Decatur, Illinois at the time. And it was in those moments of great loss and grief that we just said, God, whatever you have for us, if we are going to survive this, and not just survive, but we want to thrive, we want to grow through this, then you're going to have to meet us here. And Lord, wherever you want us to go, we'll go. Excuse me. So that's kind of been our mantra the last 10 years is, Lord, we want to obey your voice. We want to hear. We want to lean into that. And then we want to follow you. And it has been quite a journey. We've been sort of all over the eastern and northern U.S. continent, whatever. And we've just had some really cool journeys, really cool experiences with our kids and with the Lord. And our growth through grief has been one that, we didn't follow a pattern of someone else. We really just said, Lord, we want to heal and we want to grow, and I want my kids to grow through this. So.
How do you take that grief? Because a lot of people have grief and it stifles, and you stifle it or you sweep it under the rug, or it consumes you. Yeah. So how did you guys channel that and shift out of that and move through it?
Sure. So there's this, prior to even having our twins, it was 2010, and I just graduated with my master's in counseling and marriage and family therapy. And I was like, woohoo, I am going to be this counselor. I'm going to have my own office. It's going to be great. Yeah. And then we had our boys in the beginning of 2011 in March, and then I lost one in August. And so it was in those moments that I had the bookwork, hey, if you lose a child, this is how you work through it with your person that you're counseling. Yeah. But now I was faced with, okay, what do I do with this knowledge that I've been given? And Lord, I want to grow in you. And so my husband and I always had this mantra was embrace the pain. Those waves of emotion would come. It was a set of twins. So I still had to raise one, as well as grief the loss of one. I still had to honestly nurse one and know that I wasn't nursing the other one. And how do you as a mom say, okay, Jesus, I trust you in those moments? And there were a lot of moments where I was like, Lord, I can't do this. Like death would be relief to me. But it was in those moments that my husband, he's just the coolest guy, but we would kind of do this dance of pain. And I talk about it. I had written a book and just published it last year. And but we talk about this dance of pain where if I was having a really hard day, he'd be like, well, how are you doing? What's going on? And let's just embrace those moments right now. And so as we embrace those pain, it was really just as simple as, Lord, this hurts. I don't know what to do with it, but will you come and will you minister to me? And will you heal my heart in this moment? And God is so good that he would meet me in every single moment. and help me heal in the process. And, we knew early on when it happened that if we didn't get help, because we did go for counseling multiple times, but if we didn't make that a priority, the marriages that end after the loss of a child were in like the 90th percent. So we knew that our family was not going to be a statistic, and we were going to do whatever we needed to get our kids healthy, to get us healthy, to not just sweep the pain under the rug, because a lot of people do that. They're like, it's too hard. I can't do it. I can't do it. But that pain will come up later in life. And so we just decided, you know what, we're going to take it by, take the, what is it, the bull, take the horns.
Yes, exactly.
You take the horns and you wrestle that beast to the ground and say, you will not defeat me. I will work through this pain. And so here we are, 10 years later, and I feel like our family still walks through grief. And now we're in this city where we lost our son. He's buried just in a cemetery off of Fair Lawn, and all of these memories are here, But I believe that the Lord he's been so good and gracious to me to walk me through the process.
So tell us, at that point in time, 10 years ago, because you said you have 7 kids, how many kids did you have? What were their ages? Like, walk us through your family at that point in time.
Sure. So I had 5 kids, a set of twins, and then I had a 7-year-old. I got to think about this.
This is going to be the trick.
Like a 7-ish-year-old, a 4.5-year-old, and then a 2-year-old and a set of twins. So I had 5 kids, 7 and under, and I was exhausted.
Yeah.
Exhausted.
I bet. Well, and I think you take just the normal mom exhaustion, and then you compile and you add then grief on top of that.
Yeah.
So when you wrote the book, let's talk about that. Tell readers, listeners about the book. Sarah told me, like, before I even had met you, Sarah told me about your book.
Yeah, I was like, Cassie, you need to read this. You're going to bawl your eyes out.
Yeah, and she was right. Yeah. She was definitely right. And I bought it instantly. And then I think maybe a few weeks later, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later is then when I met you and stuff like that. But for me, when I read it, you have this idea of like who this person is and stuff. And I was just like, number one in awe, because I can't fathom it at all, and I think that is any human's nightmare is to lose a child. I think to lose a loved one, period, but then to have it be a child and stuff like that. And then to meet you, I'm like, and then your kids started coming up, and I met your kids.
It's just one by one.
Yeah,
They keep coming.
And it was just, I don't know, I can't think of a better, it was just the coolest experience, because very rarely does a person get to read such an intimate story about someone's life and then be able to have the privilege to like meet them and get to know them, and then be able to like see all of, like really and truly, like what you're talking about, like that dance with grief, is to be able to then see that in action when I see your family and stuff like that. But tell listeners and viewers about in the book and how that even came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started with a blog after I lost my kid, and it was therapeutic for me. I would just write, and then my husband and I, so we lost our son on August 18th, 2011, and we went away at the end of August to this retreat counseling. It was like this intensive counseling, and best thing ever. Like, I'm a huge advocate of counseling, huge advocate of counseling. And we went away, and I just began to blog, and I found that people were connecting to the story and sharing their pain. And they're like, well, if you can go through this, then maybe there's a chance that I'm going to survive this pain too. And so for about 10 years, the book became just therapeutic, and then I'd stop writing because I'm like, God, who's going to read this? Like, it really was this journey of I'd do it for about a year, and then I'd stop.
Yeah.
And then I'd write it again. I can't tell you how many times I have started that book. I have worked on the book. I've finished it. I've had people editing it. It has been a 10-year process. And every time I would stop, the Lord would be like, remember when I told you to write that book? And I'm like, oh, but God, who wants to read my story? Like, who wants to hear about me? I'm just a mom. Like, that's it. And he's just like, continuing to tell me, write the book. And so I finally finished it last summer. And one of the coolest moments, there's a lot of cool moments in the book. There's just, it's my life.
There was so many, like, just constant tingles and goosebumps, like, reading through. Like, so yeah, when you say that there's so many different, like, I I definitely can feel that reading it.
Yeah. One of my favorites. So the story is called Lilacs in November. And the name came from, it was November of 2011. And I was walking, we're living here in Decatur at a house. And I was walking to the end of my driveway, and there was this bush. Now, we had moved in June of that year, and the bush was dead. It was deader than dead. And my husband's like, oh, I'll wait, give it a year, see if it blooms. Next year, I'll pull it out. I'm like, that's fine. We were busy. We have 5 kids, you know. So you fast forward to November, and I'm taking the driveway to the end, getting the trash, you know, getting the mail. And that path is the same path that I took when we had lost our son in the middle of the night. We called 911, tried to do CPR on him, was not working. He was blue. I didn't realize that he was already gone. But I'm standing there at the end of my driveway with my baby in my arms. And the fire engine, the fireman was just incredibly sweet. I wish I could find him because he gave me so much hope in that moment and peace for what I was about to then endure. And I'm holding him. It's 4 something in the morning. My husband's in his underwear, and I'm like, save my baby. And he's like, man, we're going to do everything that we can. And he knew that he was gone. And so those memories were etched in my brain. And every time I would go that path, the end of the driveway, I was like, God, my heart hurts. Like, I can't do this. And the Lord was like, where there was once death, I want to bring life. And so I looked to my left. And again, this is the beginning of November. Mm-hmm. Things do not bloom in November. And I looked to my left, and that bush was blooming. And it was lilacs. And lilacs are my favorite flower, like from a kid. My parents used to have them at their house. I'd go out and I'd cut them all down from the bush. And like, I just about killed the bushes. Okay?
Too much pruning. Yes. But they smell so good.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And the Lord was just like, Jen, I want to bring life where there was once death.
Yeah.
And then I started looking up what lilacs mean, and they're a flower of love. And the Lord was just like, I love you, and I'm going to walk with you through this. And so that's where lilacs in November came from, because I felt like the Lord had that bush bloom just for me on that day that I needed some hope because I didn't know what to do. So
I feel like that's such proof to Romans 8:28. That's my life verse, and it's just about how God can take anything and use it for his good, even if it's like the worst thing we've ever been through. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that's just a testament, because now you've written this book, you've had this blog, and there's more people than you like could even imagine that have been touched by it. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's beautiful to have proof, like real life proof, because sometimes we don't get that. Yeah. So it's beautiful to have real life proof that this is something that God is using for his glory, even if it's the most painful thing imaginable.
Yeah, he really does. Like, you can have joy and grief in the same moment. And people always thought I was crazy. They're like, you're nuts. And I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm grieving the loss of my son, and it hurts like a beast. Yeah. But I'm also going to have joy that I know God's there. He is present with me. And I've met a number of people who've lost children, and they're just stuck. Mm-hmm. And they don't, or some people have lost so much, and they don't even walk through any grief process. Yeah. So to be able to write something, and it is intimate, you're right, but I wanted to share my story. I wanted to share that there's hope. Mm-hmm. There is hope. No matter where you are, no matter what you're walking through, there is hope.
You brought up, both of you have talked a little bit about like the stigma behind, using that pain and like finding joy. And I really think about friends and family that have gone through extreme tragedy and extreme loss, that there is that societal kind of like frown when somebody is experiencing joy after having such a huge loss. And it's so, I don't know, I think that is so painful and so much more, it's almost like you're putting more burden on those people, because life does continue on. And you have other little kids and family and other people watching. And it's like, I don't know, I guess I've never been the type that has believed that when you're going through something with grief, that you are not allowed to feel happiness. And that if there's moments of joy or moments of bliss or moments of relief, that like you're also entitled to that as well, and that's a difficult thing. And I don't know, maybe, do you think that you going through and getting your master's and doing the counseling thing, think that obviously had to have helped to be able to allow you to accept the good and that's a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think God has a funny sense of humor, because I set out to, like, when we got married, we were gonna have, I thought 3 kids. My husband said 2. We'd argue about it all the time, and we ended up with 7. So I don't know.
Why not just full send it?
Just keep having them. But we're done now. We're done. But I think that, yes, people do expect, well, if you've lost something, then you just need to stay in this state of grief.
Oh, yeah.
And then if you are joyful, well, then you haven't walked through the process. So it's like this weird kind of...
Yes, that you're in denial. If
Yes.
you are experiencing joy, then you have to be in denial.
Like, how can you lose so much and still be at peace in your soul? There was this song that we played at our son's funeral. It was very it was one of those sacred moments, if I can say that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of sacred things. I think having children is sacred. Like, it is just a beautiful, sacred moment. And so even at my son's funeral, we didn't want to have, I didn't want to have a funeral. I was like, I just want to run away. I don't want to do, but we had to walk through the process. A lot of people don't want to walk through any process that brings them sadness.
Yeah.
But as we walked through the process, the Lord would meet us there. And there was the song that we played, and I felt like the Lord had asked me, is it well with your soul that your son is gone? And I'm like, I don't know, God. I don't know. But I had to make that choice in those moments that, God, yes, this is going to be well with my soul because I trust you. You don't promise that life is going to be amazing and perfect and great. You say that you're going to walk with me through the valley of the shadow of death. You will be present with me. And so, God, I'm taking you at your word, and you better be here, because I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to go. So, and there were other just sacred things happened. So the night that we lost him, we came back from the hospital, and we were in our home, and we had told our children, and they were finally asleep in bed. And I had a sweet friend come over, and she's like, do you want me to watch Phineas, which was the twin that was still living? Do you just want me to watch him while he's sleeping to make sure he's breathing? I'm like, yes, please. Like, yes, because that was a job that was my sole job then, to make sure that my children were breathing, because we lost our son to SIDS, and that's when they don't understand why.
Yeah.
They just, children stop breathing. Babies just stop in a matter of seconds. And there's no rhyme or reason. There's nothing you can do. It just happens. And so we're sitting in our living room, and my husband is like, hey, do you want to worship? So my husband's a pastor, worship leader, whatever, prophetic, like, write songs. He's just really cool. And I was like, okay. But I felt like in those moments, the Lord was asking me, is this well with your soul? Are you going to choose to worship me even in the pain? And so my husband got out his guitar, and he had written songs years prior. And so we just began to sing these beautiful songs to the Lord. And I felt like we invited God into our pain. We said, we don't know what to do. Yes, I have book knowledge. And yes, I know I need to embrace it. But God, I don't know how to do this. And so it really has been just this learning experience for us. And the more we share it, the more healing and hope it brings.
Jenn, what about, for people that don't have that kind of relationship with God? I mean, you guys come at it from so many different avenues, I think. When people don't have that relationship and are going through something like that is just sheer tragedy, how do you offer support, or how do you try to connect with people like that really have that disconnect?
Because they don't have that God to lean on, because they don't believe in him. They don't have a relationship with him. Over the years, I've met with people who have asked that question, and I'll just sit and listen. It sounds super simple, but I will sit and I'll listen. Not say, well, let me tell you how I did it, or let me share this. It really is that, here's my listening ear, and God, what words of hope do you want me to speak into those situations in that moment? Because they don't know God, so why are they going to turn to him? That would be like, why? But I believe that because the Lord is he knows us intimately, whether we know him or not. And so I believe that as I sit with those people and just listen, that God brings stories, and they're like, well, how did you do what you did? And I'm like, well, do you want me to share Jesus with you? And it really is just this open door to walk into their lives, because they've seen the pain, they've seen the tragedy, and then they see my family, and they're like, well, you're living, you're surviving, you're thriving. Okay, maybe there is hope for me in the process. But it's never well, let me introduce you to Jesus first. It's, always let me listen to you. And I've got some great resources that I can give you, but I can share with you the one that has just changed my life. But a lot of it is just listening. I think people, when they're grieving, we want to try and fix the problem because we don't want them to be in pain, but we can't fix it.
And holding space is such a difficult thing to do for people, to just sit and listen and hold space. Because you do, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a stranger or whether it's a sibling or a friend or what, you want to try to fix it. You want to try to fix it.
You want to take that pain away from them. Like, I don't want you to hurt. Like, I never want my kids to hurt. I don't want them to get owies, but they do. And so what am I going to do in the process?
I feel like one of the hardest things for us humans to grasp is that we need to feel the pain in order to heal. Like, we can't heal from our trauma and heal from the different things that we go through if we don't feel the pain, we don't wrestle with it. So we can't just take away the pain that people feel. My biological dad is always like, I don't want you to tell me your problems because I just want to fix it. I'm just a fixer. Right. So I think it's important we can love people by being there with them through their pain.
And it is really kind of human nature to just say, okay, here's pain. No, I'm going to run from it. Yeah. Nobody wants to dive in head first into trauma and pain and unpacking that. But you said that earlier, Jen. You said if you don't deal with it, you knew that if you didn't deal with it then, you would deal with it later. And think about, I just look at, we here on the show are such advocates of like counseling and therapy and not sweeping things under the rug. That's ultimately why we talked and why we started the podcast of like, what are the things that like, I'll just use this as an example. Like, there's a lot of like mom groups that you go and you sit and it's just really more like, look at my cute purse that I bought. Well, that's fun too. Like, I get it. Like, that is fun to show the purse that you bought for your birthday. But at the same time, it's also kind of like, okay, so what was the worst thing that happened to you last week? Like, where are those real conversations that it's like, to me, I'm just at a stage in my life where I'm like, I value depth over and like true conversations. And even if it's not something that that I am aware of. So I guess maybe there's an education component that you come to that point in your life where you're like, I want to learn. Somebody may have different views than me, but I want to learn and I'm open to that. And I do feel like in my heart, and especially dealing with, a friend who's committed suicide. So same pain in the sense of loss, but very different situation. But ultimately, it's a matter of saying, I don't want to just sit in this, and you have to move through it. But
I had an experience. We lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for a couple of years, and I had a friend that I had known from third grade on. She happened to live there, and so we reconnected over a summer, and it was really great. Like, we'd go swimming, and I found out that she had done drugs earlier in her life. She had been clean for years, but in that moment, in the summer, she had dove back into that world, and after about 3 weeks of us getting together and hanging out, she committed suicide. It was a drug overdose. And the same pain that I felt when I lost my son was the pain that I felt when I lost her. And I was like, God, what do I do with this? This hurts. And I remember just crying when I found out. It was a weekend and my husband was home off work and the kids are like, Daddy, what's wrong with Mom? He's like, she's grieving the loss of her friends. And that was one of those, there are some moments over the last 10 years where it takes me back to that grief. And I'm like, God, I don't understand it. I don't know what she was going through, but Lord, help me in this process. And he does. And,
Talk to us about your kids, because it really, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like you guys have such a strong, open communication within your family because this is just my situation. I can remember, with the loss of my friend Lori, there was different dynamics of like, oh, we're not going to talk about this. And some people are, oh, don't ever bring that up. Like it's like where it just feels like for some people, death is so taboo. Yeah. So how do you deal with that within your family? Because it seems like the conversations you've had are, it's something you talk about. So talk to listeners and viewers about that.
Sure, yeah. So my older ones were present. The 3 older ones. The 3 younger ones that I have now have no idea.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay. My 7-year-old will come to me sometimes and be like, I miss her brother Zadok. His name was Zadok Samuel. She's like, I miss him. And I'm thinking, well, you didn't even ever know him. But for her, she's just connecting with some sort of emotion that, that is going on in the home or the conversation. And so they've all dealt with it differently. I have one son who was 4.5 when he passed away. He does not like to talk about it at all. It hurts him too much. So I don't feel like he's come to the place where he's willing to, okay, how do I embrace this pain? How do I walk through this? Like, it just hurts him. And then I have another one who is my oldest, and she's just amazing. And she's embraced the pain, walked through it, and the Lord is doing just phenomenal things in her life where I was super scared for her because she was the oldest when her brothers passed away, and they were her babies, man. She was like, she would come and she would change their diapers and she would hold them and she would love them. And she was just like the coolest little thing. And then when we lost one, it was just devastating for her. No child should ever have to lose a sibling. That's not fair. They should never experience that pain. But each of my children have kind of walked through it differently. And I think some are even still walking through it now. I don't think you ever get over grief. I think it just kind of morphs into something different.
May your day be filled with giggles. The place to come for cards and gifts. Personalized just for you. Come and try our tasty treats. They will leave you giggling too. Oh, the brightest spot on Merchant Street will leave you happy and complete. May your day be filled with giggles.
Before, off the air, you talked about, your biggest fear is like, are your kids going to end up in therapy? I feel like every mom, I will say, I think about that. I was with my sister on Saturday night. Her and I discussed that, where she's like, I think I'm just a really bad mom. I was like, oh no, we all think we're bad moms. Like, I do think it's just across the board. But talk about that. I mean, that probably, especially from your background of education and career path, I'm sure that is something that crosses your mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's on a daily basis. I'm like, okay, am I parenting right? Because there's so many of them. I'm so, I get overwhelmed.
So it's just,
and it's
running amok.
And then you throw in the dog. We have 2 dogs, and then we have 8 chickens, and it's just like a hot mess of chaos all the time. And I do have that question, and I have to battle that, if not daily, every other day. God, are my kids going to end up in therapy? Lord, am I messing them up so much that, I want to do parenting right, but I'm also human. I'm also short on patience. I'm also annoyed with them, but I also love them so much. So it is that constant balance of, God, help me right now parent this child. I have one child who I love, and she is not me. She's opposite of me. And I don't understand her. She's a lovely stinker. and we had a situation arise, and she's like, I don't want to do that.
Oh.
I don't want to do that.
I think I know who you're talking about.
And I'm like, okay. I called her down from upstairs the other day, and I just had a quick question to ask her about why the antenna was stuck to the wall of our home with this sticky stuff. Because now we have to peel it off, and then we have to fix the wall. And I was like, hey, can you just come here? I called her 3 times. On the 3rd time, she comes to the banister, and she's like, what can you possibly need? And I was like,
yeah, you're affecting what she's doing, the vital things that a child is doing during their day.
That's what she told me. I am busy. I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
Well, I'm using my hot glue gun because she's super creative. She's so talented. She'll take a trash pile of clothes and be like, I'm going to make something out of it. She's just amazing.
Yeah.
But yes, it is it is a daily thing. How can I parent better so that they don't end up in therapy? However, they are all unique and different, and God has orchestrated them in such a way that I'm never going to be able to fulfill or meet or parent them perfectly.
Yes.
The only thing that I can do is really lean into the Lord and say, Lord, direct me and guide me here. And when I mess up, God, let me be humble enough to go and apologize to my kids.
That's a quote right there. We put quotes on our Instagram page, and I'm like,
I'm going to send that to my mom.
Yes.
Let me apologize because I make mistakes.
Yeah, I think that is so vital. So I just have the one. Jack is 12, going on 45. And those are the two things that we have conversations about all the time. Is number one, adults are wrong. And I never want him to grow up with that mentality, that old school mentality of like either do as I say, not as I do, or children are to be seen and not heard. Like that is not how our household is at all, you know? And I want there to be a level of respect, but I want him to know that when he sees something that is wrong, or he sees something that is cruel, or he sees something that is not funny, that he has a right as a human being, no matter what age, to say, that doesn't seem okay. Like, that seems kind of mean. Like, I overheard that person say that. That's not cool. Sure. And a lot of families are not like that. A lot of families are just like, you're a child, zip it, you know? Right. And the other part of that is the apologizing of, you know, and the conversation that he and I have is usually along the lines of like, I'll tell him, you know, I'm 38 years old. And I'll say, I know I probably seem so much older to you. Like, I don't feel old. Like, and I told him that. I said, there are times that I feel like, man, high school was yesterday or college was yesterday. Right? Yes. So I'm like, you'll feel this when you get to this stage. But I told him, I was like, I don't want you to think that there is ever a set age that all of a sudden you're like, oh, I finally understand life. Like, I've arrived. I have all the answers. Because you never do. You never feel. And I believe that is the essence of who we are as human beings, that we are always evolving and learning, and like there's parts of us that we continue to know and be like, I didn't know I liked this, or I didn't know I had an interest in this until it's brought to you. But it's important, I really do think, to raise kids that way, because otherwise, if we stifle that voice and don't apologize to them or tell them, like, you don't have a say in that, like, don't call me out on stuff, then who do they become as adults? And that to me is the scary part. And maybe that's why we have so many apathetic, narcissistic adults, where it's just their world and about them, as opposed to being able to connect and love and have difficult conversations with other people.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I appreciate most about your parenting is that you foster how different and beautiful your children are, and you let them be creative. Mm-hmm. Your oldest loves leading worship, and she's talented at it. And then the one that you were talking about is so creative. She's always showing me her books, her sketchbooks, and everything. And, you know, Elijah, he's a bookworm. Yeah. And so they're all different, and they all bring something to the table. And I love that you guys just encourage that. You don't try to stuff it down and make them be somebody that they're not. Mm-hmm. And I also love that you teach them valuable things. That little chicken farm is something that they told me that you had them do. So, and it's the cutest thing. I wish I could like show you, Cassie, because Cassie hasn't seen it. But the first time I saw it, I was like, this is so cute. It's just in their backyard, and they have like a little garden and like a little chicken coop. And
okay, do you realize, I don't know what it is. Like, I think that I'm beginning to think that we're like the only people that don't have chickens. We keep talking to these people that have chickens. I mean, until Mary, like, her, like, I didn't know people did chickens.
Is it a pandemic thing? I'm wondering if
did you start yours during the pandemic? Did you get chickens?
Mary did.
Yes. Ours was last, so it was a Christmas present last year, because our daughter, that is the middle one, really wanted chickens. And so my husband's like, let's get chickens for them. So we
Cassie's like, never.
She'll be 13.
So cool.
She's 13 on Thursday.
And be like,
yeah.
Chickens on my Christmas list.
Yeah. So we had to get a chicken coop. And then we bought our chicken coop. We bought and the chicken coop wasn't big enough then. So then when we go to get the chickens 2 months later, because you can't get them at Christmas time.
Yes.
So we'll go to Farm and Fleet, I think, to get the chickens. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, let's get 4. Like, we've never done chickens before. I don't even know.
Seems like a safe number to start with.
My husband's like, we're going to get 8. So we have 8 chickens. And the reason is because he thought that some of them would die, because sometimes, they die.
R.I.P. Sheryl Crow.
None of them have died.
Okay. Oh, none of them have.
We have 8.
So now you have like billions of eggs?
And so then we had to get a bigger chicken coop, and that was a whole fiasco and hilarious, because you have these 2 city folk trying to get this huge chicken coop in the back of a U-Haul, driving through Decatur. Yeah, it was comical.
So that was going to be my next one. Do you name them? Because Sarah and Mary, they all have, every time, Sarah, I feel like you guys are like, I'm like, who thinks of these things? Like, I feel like I'm a semi-creative person, but then she's
children.
Like, Sheryl Crow.
It's
like,
my
what?
kids.
Yes.
One is waffles.
Oh.
Which is hilarious because like chicken and waffles go together. And I don't remember the rest of the names. I don't pay attention.
Bella, do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got our daughter Bella here in the studio.
What are the other names?
Okay, there's waffles, nugget.
Waffles
Nugget.
and nugget, of course. There has to be a chicken nugget. Fluffles.
Yes, fluffles. She's
Mm-hmm.
Sugar.
Sugar.
Oh, sugar.
Bear. Big red.
Bear and Big Red.
Sugar.
Yeah.
And there's 2 more, but we don't.
Two more.
Sure,
They're neglected.
I don't know what their names.
Yeah.
We see the favorites.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. So when we first got the chickens, though, we brought them home. We had like this little brooder thing in the garage, and it was like March-ish, and so it's chilly. My children wanted to sleep in the garage with the chickens. Oh my gosh!
Just keep an eye
So
on
they brought
them.
they brought
love and care.
they brought the mattresses and their pillows and their blankets, and there they are sleeping in the garage for the evening, like all night with these little.
But
baby
this also speaks to who you are as parents, because I think that you allow your children to do things that other parents would be like, nope, here's the rule.
So I
don't do
said
it.
no. I was like, no, you guys are not. And my husband was like, oh yeah, let him do it.
Josh is the one. Josh is the one pushing it.
All night. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And they did. They lasted all night, and they love it, and it's awesome. But I'm not naturally. I'm more of a control freak when it comes, and so that grates
With that many
against.
kids, I feel like you would have to have some sort of control.
Yeah, we have to have some order.
There is some saying where it's like, well, I don't know, something along the lines where there's like the appearance of control, where it's like, I think I kind of have control of the household, but let's be honest.
I really don't.
You don't.
I learned a couple years ago that I cannot control every aspect of it, everything that goes on in my life. And so, that was a great tension. It was a great inner turmoil for me, because I have that kind of temperament where I'm like, I have to control. And so I had to figure out, okay, what can I control, but still give that freedom to my kids and to the rest of the family to live. Like, I can't control my husband. And if I try to control him as a wife, our marriage is not going to succeed. Yeah. It's not. So I've had to learn to, what can I control? Well, I can control my pantry, or I can control my bedroom and make sure that's clean, or I can control, I don't know, because right now my house is a hot mess.
Well, okay, so what does that look like when you joke and you say, I can't control my husband? Because I think there's a lot of listeners and viewers that are like in that marital strife of like, you know, what does that look like for you and Josh?
So early in our marriage, we went to counseling, and the counselor was like, Jen, you need to leave your husband alone and let him go. Like, if he wants to make choices, and they weren't bad choices. It was just like, hey, I want him to come home from work and do all these chores that I have, and I'm really ticked off that he's not doing what I want. And so she's like, you need to let your husband fail. You need to just release him and let him go. And again, that grates against me. And so I've had to learn to just let him lead our family. Let him make decisions. And he's so gracious. He's like, well, I want to make the best decision. So what do you think? How do we need to go about this? So we really have learned to do this dance together in our decision making and in our parenting, in our big decisions of moving and all of that, to where we work together. But I really have had to take my hands off and say, he's his own person. He's a big boy. And that has really given me a lot of freedom. You know, people think, well, in order to have like this freedom, I got to have control over everything.
Yes.
But the minute you let go and you just let them be, there's such a sense of freedom. And I've our marriage, but we have had to work at it. I've had to do a lot of, I release you, go be awesome. And I trust you. And it's a beautiful thing now, but it took me some time.
What's your story? How did you guys meet?
We met in Bible college in 1997 and started dating. I was actually dating someone else at the time, and he broke my heart like the first 3 weeks of school and broke up with me, and I was devastated. It was awful.
Man.
But I'm so glad he did. I'm so glad.
It's like that I bring this up all the time. I know this is a horrible connection, but it's like that old Garth Brooks song of unanswered prayers.
Yes.
And it's like, God, thank you so much for that
you.
prayer not getting answered.
I know,
You dodged a
right?
bullet.
It's awesome. So we met at
it
Bible
is.
college, and we were friends for a while. Well, I say a while, it was like 6 months. But then we went to like
Well, in Christian world, that's like 3 years.
right.
That is true.
Right. So then we got engaged like 2.5 years later, and then got married right after I graduated from college, and we've been married ever since.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And you moved around. Like, what's some of your favorite places that your,
Where we've
ministry
lived?
has taken you?
So it's been such a journey, and people think we're nuts, like I said, but that's okay. I'm good with it. Probably one of my favorite places was we live south of Boston, Massachusetts. And so when we were here in 2011, we lost our son. Well, 2 months later, my husband, the church did away with his job. So we had a job loss, we had a child loss. How do you pick up those pieces?
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, in our denomination, we thought, well, maybe we'll go pastor. So there was a church that opened up in south of Boston. Love the area. Oh my gosh, Boston is like a special place in my heart. And so we moved there, and we were there for about 6 months. Then the church ended up closing and stuff. There were just other dynamics going on. But excuse me, those 6 months that I was in Boston, I would take my kids to the beach every day. And it was Green Harbor. Green Harbor is this little beach. And so I go and I have this big old double stroller, and I'd pack it down with all the chairs. Then I had a cooler full of all snacks. And daily we would go to the beach, and I would drag all of that stuff out. I mean, if you've ever been at the beach,
Yes.
like carrying stuff. And I had 4 kids. So it was me and the 4 kids. And I would go and I plop my chair down. And my little one, he was just over a year old, and he would sit in a 31 bag on the beach because that was like the little, it kept him contained.
perfect, yeah.
And the other kids played and they excursioned, and they did so many cool adventuring through the water and the things that we'd find. But it was therapeutic for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because every day I could go to that beach and I could meet Jesus. And so those 6 months in Boston, I think the Lord gave me as a gift for me. And it was just the most beautiful thing. That was probably our favorite place.
Yes.
One of the things I love most about your book is that you walk through what it was like to find out you were pregnant again for the first time. And the full circle moment that came. And then to find out you were pregnant again. So tell readers, well,
I know.
we're
I
reading
thought
this
about that too.
podcast. Tell words are hard. I can't do it. Tell viewers and listeners kind of what that journey was like and how you found peace in being pregnant again. Because I'm sure that was hard.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was scary.
It was so scary. I found out I was pregnant with our girl in 2013. Again, we had lost our son in 2011. We had discussed having more children in the future, but weren't sure. And then I found out I was pregnant, and I don't even know how it happened. Honestly.
Well, Jen,
Well,
let's talk about this now.
Josh and Jen looked at each other, and that was it.
I felt like I got pregnant every 2
would
years.
feel it. I mean, I feel like Bible school would have taught about that also, I would think.
She did, and I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. I don't know how to do this. God, I don't know how to trust you in these vulnerable moments that I am so scared. So it was a lot of, with her name is Judah Joy Hope. And we had named her Judah because we were determined that we were going to praise the Lord no matter what came. God, it is well with our soul. We're trusting you. And so we named her Judah, which means praise. And then Joy was actually my older daughter came to us one day. And before I gave birth to Judah Joy, she's like, Mom, I really think we should name her Joy. And I'm like, well, I was going to name her Judah Hope, but okay. So we named her Judah Joy Hope. And I felt like that was significant for my daughter too. Because there were some things that the Lord was doing in her heart, which were so beautiful. So yes, there was a lot of anxiety. I dealt with PTSD for years after the loss of our son, where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I just 0 to 60, my heart's racing, and I'd run in their rooms and I'd put my hand on their chest just to see if they were breathing. And then I'd try to go back to bed. Or there was this anxiety, well, what if I lose another child? What am I going to do with that? How do I cope? How do I handle life? God, I cannot handle another broken heart. And it really is just those raw moments of inviting God into the process. So we did. We had Judah Joy Hope in 2014. She has a birthday coming up the end of February. I'm so excited. She's going to be 8. She's a little spitfire. Oh, Jesus, help me. I think I have a couple of those. And then about 3.5 years ago, we ended up, we were living in Texas at the time, and my PTSD had actually stopped in 2015. I just want to rewind a little bit, and it was the coolest thing. I had dealt with it for about 4 years, and Judah Joy was about a year old, and we had taken a trip to South Carolina, to Myrtle Beach.
Oh, I love it.
And someone had given us this condo right on the water, so you open the bedroom door, and there's the ocean. It was just gorgeous. And my husband's like, okay, you need to put the baby in the front room. It was the 3-bedroom condo, but in her little pack and play. And now she had slept with me on my chest from the night she was born. Like, I didn't sleep. I never slept. Like, in those 4 years, I hadn't slept a whole night of sleep, peaceful sleep. And he's like, you need to let her go. And I'm like, well, what if she dies? And he's like, I hate him for this question, but I love him for this. He's like, what if? What are you going to do? And he's like, you have to go there and to that. Okay, what if? What are you going to do if your daughter passes away? She was healthy. She was fine. And she ended up sleeping all night. I ended up sleeping all night. And I never had a panic attack in the middle of the night again. And I really felt like that was significant for me in dealing with PTSD. And I didn't realize, like I said, this is a journey. I didn't realize that is what I dealt with for so many years. But it wrecked my life. It was awful. And then you fast forward, like I said, to 2018, found that I was pregnant with our last one. And he's so special. I feel like the Lord has really redeemed because like my first one, I'm scared, I'm nervous, new parent. And then the more you have, and then you lose, then you have to work through that. And then Arrow, his name is Arrow, Benjamin Arrow, we call him Arrow. And he came along and I'm like, I've just enjoyed. It's been this peaceful enjoyment. Now, he is a little stinker, too. Probably because he's the baby. I don't know.
It's part of it, for sure. Yes.
But with him, it's just been this beautiful process from the time I was pregnant to the time I gave birth to him sleeping through the night. And I'm not going to lie and say that those things don't come up. Like, is he still breathing? Is he this, that, and the other? But I'm at a different place in my life where I feel like I can handle it differently.
Mm-hmm. Jen, can you talk about, you've discussed like the way that you've gone through things and you've handled grief and whatnot, but for listeners and viewers who are maybe dealing with a tragedy, can you talk about the situation with Josh? Like, how do you feel like you as a partner helped with his healing or vice versa? Because I do think that sometimes, not to be stereotypical, but sometimes men do disconnect. They handle stress, they handle trauma, they handle grief differently than females do. And everybody handles it differently regardless. But I do think that that's probably a question that people have of like, I'm in that same situation and I don't know how to connect with my spouse, or I don't know how to get it out of my partner and I can literally see it eating them alive. Like, how would you use your story or your background to go through that and help somebody?
I think the first thing is that everyone deals with grief differently. And you have to allow them to express it in the way that is best suited for them. And with my husband, he lost a son and then he just went to work because he's like, well, I got to provide for my family. Mm-hmm. I've got to provide for my family. And so there were glimpses over the years where he would, like our time in Boston, he had this job where he would aerate lawns. And so he would go and he would just aerate the lawn and be alone with Jesus and look at the beautiful sea. Like, that was his job. And so that was therapeutic for him. But it probably wasn't until 2018. There was a season where he was looking for a new job. And so he had about 7 months off. And our baby was newly born in November. And so for the next 7 months, Josh really got to spend time with him and with our family. It was just this beautiful season. It was so beautiful. But it was very much like a sabbatical for him. And he will talk about that is where he finally found himself again. Because he had time to think, he had time to process, he had time just to sit with his thoughts. And there have been times where he's battled depression, where he's, and what does that look like for us? And I go back to, I had to let him grieve the way that he was going to grieve. I couldn't control him. The only thing that I did was pray for him. and say, Jesus, bring people that are going to speak into his life and help him walk through this process. Because me hounding him or me saying, hey, let's go to counseling, or hey, let's do this. And he was very open to all of that. But there were seasons where it was just difficult. And I had to let him do what he was going to do. And it is that beautiful dance of pain. Hey, how are you doing today? There are still things that will come up. And I'm like, hey, what's going on with that? And then I let him talk about it. But I don't fill in the words for him. And I think there's a lot of people who would want to just say, oh, well, let's just fix it, or let's put a Band-Aid on it, or let's just push through. And no, you have to let them grow as a human. I mean, you don't expect your 2-month-old to just get up and walk and eat table food. There's a process. And it's very important to go through the process and not skip.
What would you say to those who say that they themselves or their partner are unwilling to go through that process?
That's a tough situation. Like, my heart would break for those people because there's nothing that you can do to force someone to heal. You just kind of have to let them go at their own pace. But what you can do is you can take care of you. You can become the best, the healthiest version of you. So you dive into counseling. You dive into getting a support system. You dive into fixing yourself. And I lean on the Lord and would say, God, I need you right now. I can't tell you how many times it's like, Jesus, I need you now because I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get over this hurdle or to work through this situation. So I 100% lean on the Lord. But if you don't have God in your life, work on yourself.
I think it's important to recognize that healing is not linear and it looks different for every single person. And if you're in that situation where your spouse isn't dealing with it, I think it could be important to lead by example and lead by doing those things for yourself. And then maybe they see that and they're like, oh, well, what does that person have that I don't have? Or why are they able to deal with it and I'm not? Like, what are they doing and what are the steps? I think it's important to lead by example.
And just about, I feel like with anything grief-wise, that no matter who it is, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a coworker where, I mean, everybody handles things so differently, but just to, like you said, Jen, just to kind of fix or try to help heal yourself ultimately will help. But talking about grief is such a difficult thing. I have a business coworker that, she lost a son, an adult son. And, that's some of the things that, like, she has said before in the past where she'll say, sometimes people are afraid to ask me about AJ or like memories, or like it'll be his birthday and they're like, well, do I say happy birthday about it? Do I bring it up to her? And what is your take on that? Because I do truly believe that people are trying to do the best they can. I would like to go into it with that open heart of like, if somebody is not available to show up for you, it's not because they don't like you or they're upset or I really feel like they don't have the words,
Right.
So in your experiences through all of this over the years, how would you advise people or help people who have a friend or a family member that is going through a tragedy?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It is a really good question. One of the things that people have done for us, so our twins were born in March. We lost one in August. And one of the things that we do is every August 18th, sounds crazy, but that's the day he died. We have a celebration.
Well, yeah, celebration of life.
We do. Our family over the last 10 years, when we lived on the East Coast, we'd go to the mountains or we'd go to the beach. Or one time we got to send off it was a message in a bottle. And we drew pictures and just briefly told our story and had someone was supposed to take it out to the end of the ocean or, in the middle of the ocean and drop the bottle. And they never, the bottle, and this is a chapter in the book, if you don't mind me sharing.
Yeah, please do.
Okay,
Yeah.
So this was one of those profound things where God showed up in my life. And so we were sending this message off in a bottle, and it was in August of 2016. And my dad was like, I know a guy. My dad's this East Coast guy. He's like, I know a guy. He's going to take it out, And I'm like, okay, cool. So we left. We were living in North Carolina at the time, drove back to North Carolina. And I never thought anything of it other than it was going to go out to the middle of the ocean somewhere. And I wonder where it's going to end up someday. And I put my email on there. And, well, it was January 2020. And I get this email from a girl. in Delaware. I didn't know she was in Delaware at the time though. And she says, are these pictures yours? And is this bottle yours? And she had broken it open, and I'm like, oh my gosh, those are my sweet kids' pictures. Oh, like it just brought back all these memories, and what a beautiful time. And she's like, so I bought this boat, and this was on the boat, and my friend and I cleaned off the boat. And as we were cleaning, we found this bottle, and it was in the corner, and I was like, well, that's so strange, because it was supposed to go out to sea. And she said, my friend who found it, it was the year anniversary of her twins that she had lost. And she's reading your story, and she is just blown away that God would think of her in those moments of her grief and her loss at her year anniversary of losing her twins. And I was shocked, and I had no words. I was speechless, because that God would care enough about that girl that I have no idea who she is. We're sending this bottle out to the ocean, and here's our story. Where's it going to end up? Australia? Like, that was my hope. And no, that bottle was exactly where it was supposed to be. So I think sometimes in life we can have these plans and these purposes, and in reality, they don't work out the way that we desire them to. But that girl found hope that day because she read our story and opened the bottle. And so I just thought it was just really, really cool how God orchestrated all that and brought healing. And
the way you say that, sometimes you have this perspective of how your life is going to be. I mean, every episode we ask everybody, what is one word? What would you say collectively you left at the door in order to love and grow and move forward? So what would you say your word is then, Jen?
I would think it's ideals. I had this picture perfect. This is what my life is going to be. I don't know if you ever remember a Folgers commercial from, let's say probably the 80s or 90s-ish. I'm going to date myself here, but that's okay.
No, I'm right there with you.
And so in this commercial, it's a beautiful white house. It's like a Cape Cod, and mom wakes up early in the morning, and there's a smell of coffee, and her college son had come home early, and he's walking down the stairs, and I cry every time I think about it, because that's what I wanted for my family. I even talk about it in the book. Like, this is my ideal, my perfect family. And I grew up in a family that was not perfect. Dysfunctional, broken home. And so there was a lot of heartache that I had to even work through prior to getting married and having kids. And so I would say that ideal of the perfect family, of everything's going to work out great. My kids are going to thrive. We're going to have money in the bank. Everything's just going to be perfect, picture perfect. I think I had to throw that out the door a long time ago and realize that life happens, and life sucks, and life is difficult, and life is hard. But the opposite is that life is good. Mm-hmm. Life is rich. God redeems. God restores in such a way that it is better than what my ideals were. Yes, I would absolutely love to have my son here. Oh my gosh, every day I look at his brother and I'm thinking, there's two of them. Oh my gosh, Jesus, help my broken heart. But God, I trust you in this process. And so I just hold that really loosely, and know that God's plan and purpose and perfect will for me is so much greater than my picture perfect white little house with the snow and all of that. So I would say that my word is my ideals. I just left them at the door, and I've decided to be super flexible, try to be flexible.
Mm-hmm. Let go of that control.
And let go, release it, and say, okay, God, what do you have planned for me? And where do you want our family to journey? And who are we going to encourage and reach and listen to? Because listening to people's stories will get you a lot further in a relationship than anything else. So I'd say ideals.
This has been, I think we could talk for hours. There's
so many stories, like so many.
That's what we need to do. We just need to have you come back and, because the perspective, just even your perspective as a mom, your perspective from the counselor, like all of these different avenues, there's just so many, just so many good conversations that can be had because of those experiences. And it is heartbreaking to know that you have to have tragedy sometimes to find the depth in things, or to find gratitude and have that grateful heart. But I do sometimes think about when you said throwing ideals out the door, it's like, had you not gone through that, the depth of your relationship with Josh wouldn't maybe have been the same. The relationship and the depth that your children have wouldn't have been there.
No, it wouldn't. My relationship with the Lord, I would have been, I always wondered, I'm like, God, what am I going to be when I grow up? And I still ask that question.
Yes.
Lord, what am I going to be? Because yes, I am a mom, but there's this whole other part of me. And I feel like the Lord has just really kind of taken my ideals and said, yeah, that was a good idea. Do want to be a counselor one day, but I think I've got a different plan for you. So why don't you just trust me in this? And I'm like, okay, Lord. Okay.
I think you need to be on a speaking circuit. That's what I'm going to go for.
I would love to share my story from a, that's a dream of mine.
We're going to breathe life into that.
It's like in the back of I'm like, Jesus.
No, take it from the back and put it in the front. Yeah, because I do. I mean, it's like you said, Jen, when you started blogging and like people would reach out and all of a sudden you're realizing that you're helping people. Like I always posted, especially like, the anniversary of, Lori's death or when it was her birthday or something like that. I'm like, I'm going to post this. It is for me and her, and that is my words are my release. That's just the way it is. And every single time I post, I kid you not, somebody that oftentimes that I know intimately will reach out to me and say, hey, I've never told anybody this, but my boyfriend in college committed suicide. Hey, Cassie, no one knows this, but my best friend, when I was growing up, she committed suicide, but the family didn't want to know. So it's like just one of those things that all of a sudden you touch someone and you had no idea. It wasn't the purpose. It wasn't the goal to just put it out there and be like, hey, does anybody need some help here?
Right.
But the connection and that people find when there's true vulnerability and that open heart, from that point, I do think it changes you as a person, and it makes you feel safe to know, okay, you know what?
It breathes life into their soul, and they're like, I'm not alone in this pain. Like, we don't have to sit around and cry all the time, but someone else, there's a friend, and every anniversary, every couple of years, she'll put a wreath or something on Zadok's tomb. And when we didn't live in Decatur, I was like, that was the most precious thing that she remembered my baby. Or I'll get random cards from people. Hey, I just want you to know I was thinking of you and I remember your son today. And I'm like, because year after year, it feels like, oh, he's not here. Who remembers him? Like as we meet new people and they don't know that I have a set of twins, guys. Like I was in the twin family, like legit in the twin family. And then to not be. So that remembrance, that like it really does breathe hope into people's soul that, hey, I see your pain. I can't fix it, but I'm going to sit with you.
Yeah. And the cool thing is you get to heal through that process. So you're healing with other people
Totally do.
as they heal. It's just cyclical. I love it.
Really is.
And the cool thing is you're a pastor and Josh is a pastor. So if you can't get enough of Jen, you can listen to our messages from Renaissance Church on YouTube and Vimeo and podcast. And
let's put all of those links on our page so that way people can connect with you. We'll put the link up so that way people can connect and purchase Lilacs in November. I don't care if you're a mom or not. Like
I'm not a mom.
You made that recommendation.
I jumped to that book. The Sunday that they announced it, I was like, I'm ordering this today. I am ordering this because I love Jen and I love her perspective on things. So
It's been
love
so
it.
healing, honestly, too. The day that I finally released it, we went to the sunflower fields in Champaign.
Yes.
It was like so hot. And I'm like, kids, we're going to the sunflower fields and we're going to have fun.
It was like August.
It was terrible. It was so bad. And they were like, Mom, it's so hot and it's muddy and it's gross. And I'm like, just enjoy it and let me get some cute pictures.
Yes, I don't care if you're sweating, just smile.
And then we went to Portillo's and we had lunch. And my friend who was really doing a lot of the behind work for me. She sent me a text and she's like, it's live. And I just bawled. Because this was is intimate. This is my gift to people that have lost and gone through trial. Like here's some hope. You might not know Jesus, that's okay. But here's my story, and God showed up in my intimate, vulnerable life, and I want that for you.
Jen?
Cassie's gonna cry.
I know. Sarah's gonna.
good.
Yeah, you are. I know. That's and I think that's another piece of it is just people don't. People stifle a lot of it.
I do. My kids are like, oh no, here come the waterworks. You know, it's like a running joke in our family, but it's so true.
Okay, well, I mean, literally, my sister and I joke. It has been, oh man, I mean, ever since we were little kids, we always say, like, my maiden name was Pfeiffer, and so we say it's not a Pfeiffer family event unless somebody's crying, but it's never a bad cry, you know. And it's so, God, I can remember like times like my dad would be coming off from work and he'd show up to a restaurant where we'd be and like, you know, it's me, my sister, my mom, and then my brother. And he'd be like, the girls are crying. And he'd like walk up to the table and there we are like crying and stuff. And Graham would be like, I didn't do it. They're just talking about feelings. But, you know, and he tried to play it off like he was this tough cookie. And now that he's a dad, now it's like, I mean, it's very cyclical, but we say that it's not, somebody's always crying. It's a good thing.
It's life for your, like, it just waters your soul.
Do you ever have those moments where like, dang, I haven't cried in a while. I need to cry. I need to have a good cry. So I'll like watch something sad.
This is true. But you know what's neat to me? My sister is obviously the doctor of the family. She's got that biology brain. And she sent us an article about how when you freeze tears, tears look different depending on how you freeze them. So, depending on how they're frozen. So, tears of joy, when they are frozen, have a different pattern. Tears of happiness, tears of sadness, tears of extreme grief. You need to Google this. We'll put that link up too. But to me, again, I know some people are not religious, some people are spiritual and things like that, but I'm like, even your tears are a work of art. Like, that's not nothing. So,
I can't tell you how many times Cassie and I have been like at a Mexican restaurant, and then all of a sudden we're just talking and getting into a deep conversation, and then she's just like, in the middle of a Mexican restaurant.
yeah, I don't care if I'm in public. If something's I'm gonna cry.
You know, that has been, that's another part of my story. Whether I was, Hobby Lobby was a huge one. Chick-fil-A for me over the years, especially when I would take my kids and we'd go get a butter biscuit from Chick-fil-A and we'd be sitting there and their music was just so soothing and it was a lot of his worship and stuff, and I would just be bawling. And the Lord would meet me in those moments because I miss my son. That's it. I just miss my son, and God show up now.
It hits you in the most random times. I think that's the other thing, that people try to control that grief to where it's like, well, I can only cry when I'm in my shower or in my bedroom or by myself. When I'm at church.
I'm in the middle of Target and I'm crying over my friend who committed suicide 7 years ago.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Something just happens and triggers you, and it's like there's a reminder.
Embrace all of that in those moments because it's raw and it's real, and that's where the most growth and healing can come.
Yeah,
I'm no doctor, but you know, I do often feel like those around me that are dealing with grief or anxiety or depression or things like that, the ones that are struggling the most are the ones that don't ever allow themselves to feel it. I truly believe that. And I do think that when you, even just in little ways, even if it is in private, but you feel there's no way around it.
I think we're meant to do this life thing with people. And when we isolate, we become an island and you can't really grow and heal. But when you bring people around who are going to literally hold you up and support you and say, hey, you're having a bad day, I'm going to bring you some coffee, I'm going to sit with you, and we're just going to talk. I'm just going to listen.
Yeah.
We're supposed to do life with people.
We talked about that in our Valentine's Day episode. I think God created community. He created us to live in community for a reason.
He did.
Yeah.
I hate being isolated. Oh my gosh. Ask my kids, like, do we have to be home again, Mom? Can we go be with people, please?
It's about to snow, and I'm thinking, like, who can I get snowed in with? Because I don't want to be alone. Because I live alone. And I love Wrigley, but he's not that great of a snowed in partner.
Just a furry guy who's going to go outside all the time.
Yeah, and he's going to enjoy it, and he's going to be out there for 20 minutes while I'm slipping and sliding on my butt and bruising it. So
it's always fun.
It is. Oh my God. Well, we're going to put all these links up, all the things we discussed today, so that way people have access to your book. And then, like you talked about, you know, if you want more of Jenn, then you can also get, you know, hear her and your sermons and whatnot. This has been great.
This has been super really fun. Thank you guys. It really has been an honor. I didn't set out to set a world record with sales of books. I set out to share my story.
Yes. Well, that's what we're going to do. Yeah. You might sell some books, but you're going to spread love.
That's good.
That's what it's going to be. Yes. Well, this has been another episode of Left at the Door.